This video has the latest look and overview for the weather pattern from the next few days to the rest of March as we look at some long-range data. This includes a look at some bigger scale storm systems that will become possible again by the end of the upcoming week. Stick around for all those details right here. Without further ado, I want to go ahead and jump into talking about the overview for the near-term weather pattern. We'll talk about this for the next few minutes. Then after that, we'll talk about some of the longer-range storm signals. Then we'll talk about how active the rest of March could be beyond, say, March 20th. All that's coming up, so use the timestamps in the description to skip ahead to those aspects of the video. But let's go ahead and jump ahead, giving you a look at what the European model is showing for the 15 to 20,000 foot pattern as you jump on up into the atmosphere. Now, this is not as complicated as many people may think. In areas where you see those yellows and oranges on screen is where the jet stream is being pushed north, and you have ridging. So in this case, as we get into the first couple of days of the upcoming week, out of Sunday into Monday, and a lot of this will continue as the week goes on, a general flow of anomalous ridging with the jet stream being pushed north, and that is going to mean near to above average temperatures, in some cases temperatures that will be above average by as much as 15 to 25 plus degrees, filling up some parts of the central and eastern U.S. One exception to that will be with this little area of blue you see here to kick off the week into parts of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and the Carolinas, where a brief low pressure system will come out of Sunday into Monday before moving off the coast, and that's going to allow for a little bit of a dip in the jet stream there that's going to keep temperatures cooler than average for that first day of the week, with some rainfall moving through. Beyond the Monday time frame, it looks pretty smooth sailing for a lot of the rest of the week as we continue to watch a generally warmer pattern filling up a lot of the central and eastern U.S. We might see a brief cool down Tuesday in some parts of the north central U.S. due to a brief cold front, but the general consensus is these yellows and oranges that will continue to spread east and eventually set us up for that bigger scale storm system that will move into this warmer than average air by the end of next week. Now that you've seen some of the moving parts for the pattern ahead with that atmospheric overview, I want to go ahead and give you a look at some of those storm systems I was just discussing here, although there won't be many of them as we go through the near-term part of the upcoming week. Let's push things out of our Saturday when I'm recording this and into our Sunday, March 9th of 2025, where the general consensus is going to be dry conditions from the west coast all the way to the northeast coast of the U.S., the only exception being with some storms that could even spawn some isolated tornadoes or damaging winds as you get close to the immediate Gulf Coast of the U.S., from Louisiana and Arkansas all the way down there to where that tornado threat could be elevated in far southern parts of Georgia and into North Florida. Some scattered showers, some scattered storms. The overall impact from this system going to be pretty weak even as we get into our Monday and as the rain rates pick up over some parts of Alabama, Georgia, into South Carolina, and the parts of central and northern Florida. We could watch some isolated flooding out of this system as it brings rain over the same areas by the time we get through our Monday, but by the time we get to the very end of our Monday, that system pushes offshore. You can see a little bit of energy moving on through with some possible light snow into the upper peninsula of Michigan by the time we get out of Monday into Tuesday with the cold front that's going to briefly cool things down before we warm right back up into parts of the Dakotas, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, but the general trend being spring-like warmth continuing to build with dry conditions for a lot of the central and eastern U.S., even back into the west until we get past midweek. With that being said, the last aspect of the near-term weather pattern we need to discuss is the forecasted high temperatures day by day, and we're going to do that right here with the National Digital Forecast Database. And as we start here into our Sunday, March 9th, what you're going to notice is all of this warmth here spilling on up into the central and north central parts of the plains, into parts of Montana, North and South Dakota, Minnesota as you get back down here through Nebraska, eastern parts of Colorado as you get east of the Rockies, through parts of Kansas, northern Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, even into some parts of the Ohio Valley, these yellowish and orangish shades, indicating 50s and 60s. Many of these spots should be in the 40s or even in some cases below during this time of still what's considered winter, at least in the astronomical seasons. This is very warm air for this time of the year, and it's actually going to beat some of the 50s we're going to see in the southeast, as those zones will be dealing with some clouds and rain. Some of that will continue into parts of the Carolinas as we watch 50s there into our Monday, but the general consensus is going to be more warmth into even the mid-south and up the Mississippi River Valley, with mid to upper 60s and even low 70s getting as far north as places like Springfield, Missouri, and Springfield, Illinois. Look at these numbers right on up here. This chain of warmth that could be getting very close to the upper 60s and even into the low to mid 70s as you come out of Nebraska and up into the Dakotas and Minnesota. Those boxes indicating the pretty high confidence that we could even see record warm highs as temperatures get above 20 to even 30 degrees above normal into our Monday up here. Again, though, just a general spell of warmth anywhere from Arizona, where we'll have some highs in the 80s there into the south central parts of the state, all the way over to the Mississippi River Valley endpoints east. And we'll continue to warm up in a lot of these zones as we get into Tuesday. But as I mentioned earlier in the video, we will see that brief cold front, and that's going to mean parts of the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and into the upper peninsula of Michigan will only hit the 30s and 40s after just being in the 60s a day before. Tuesday will be cooler there, but otherwise, as you get further south, smooth sailing with a big change of 70s anywhere from Florida all the way even on up into the mid-Atlantic, some 70s in a place like Washington, D.C., all the way back over to the south central plains, expanding spring-like warmth, continuing to build on through. By the time we get towards Wednesday and Thursday, warmth will continue to return in abundance, even all the way on up towards the Canadian border in the north central U.S., and that's why I'm concerned with all this warmth building. Once we get our next storm system, it could be severe, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment. Here we are looking back up at the atmospheric pattern again, as this blended guidance is going to give us a general idea of what to expect as we go through the March 10th and onward time frame, as we look more at the mid-range pattern before we'll talk even more long-range deeper into the video. This is going to give you the idea that we're going to be looking at a larger scale storm system by the end of next week, and here's the hint at it. By the time we get out of our Wednesday and Thursday with all that ridging building in the east as indicated by the orangish and reddish shades, by the time we get into our Friday, March 14th, you've got a big blue trough, even some greenish shades indicating the intensity of the big dig in the jet stream or trough that's going to be moving through the western and southwestern parts of the country. By the time we get towards Friday, a big battleground zone is likely going to be setting on up right smack dab in the middle of the country, and this setup looks very familiar because we saw a storm just like this just a few days before when I was recording this video that moved all across the United States with a trough moving in from the west into an area beginning to see ridging and warmer than average conditions to the east. This looks like a very similar setup, if not a more potent setup for a strong low pressure system to form. And look at this, the trough continues to look like it will progress east, and blended guidance has very high confidence in that occurring by the time we get out of Friday and then into the Saturday and Sunday time frame of that following weekend. So from March 14th through the 15th into the 16th and 17th, it's when it looks like a big trough that will eventually weaken down, will be forcing itself up against a ridge that's going to be to its east, and that could mean a widespread field of impacts across a lot of the U.S., and I'm going to break down now with some future radar guidance how that could generally look with a very preliminary glance at that system. Alright, here we are looking at the GFS ensemble guidance. This is your other guidance as opposed to your European ensembles. This has a look at future radar, and this is perfect for giving a general overview of what it and the European ensembles are both agreeing on with that big system expected as we go deeper into next week. First of all, I did want to point out, despite the fact that we'll be generally warm and dry over a lot of the central and eastern zones, or at least, again, warmer and drier in comparison to average for this time of the year by the time we get towards midweek, as we go out of Wednesday into our Thursday, we could watch a very brief system moving through some parts of the Mississippi Valley or some surrounding areas. That could bring some rain or maybe even some stronger thunderstorms at times, but generally the impacts of that will be pretty low in comparison to the big storm that will be moving out by the time we get out of Thursday into Friday. Let's talk about that storm as it moves through the west as we get out of Wednesday into Thursday, though. First, low pressure likely moving its way through some parts of the Rockies by the end of the day Thursday, and as it does so, bring in that very strong northwest to southeast flow. Does this look familiar? If you've been with me watching the videos recently, there's a low that looked just like this that happened last week, bringing that strong system across the entire country. Here we go again with heavy snow, especially as you get into some of the higher elevations here as you come through the Rockies and Four Corners zones after already moving through some parts of the Sierras there in California. With the rain in the valleys, that could even lead to some flooding. Eventually, as we go out of Thursday into Friday, we see the low pressure beginning to form some precipitation on out here into the plains. And you see those lines very close to each other. Those are isobars indicating areas of pressure. This is a very strong pressure gradient that's likely going to be initiated, if this guidance continues to hold, by a low pressure that's going to be below 980 millibars. That is well into what would be hurricane strength if you saw a low pressure system like this out over the open water. Now, am I saying that this is going to be a hurricane strength windstorm moving through some parts of the Central Plains? No, I am not. This is on land, and of course wind is always elevated when you go over the water, but still a very strong circulation of showers and strong storms right on in front of a low pressure system, and snow wrapping back around and possibly leading to blizzard conditions along with the wind as you come around the backside. This looks like a very potent system, especially as you finish the week around Friday right here smack dab into the central parts of the U.S., and then from there it doesn't show any signs of slowing down. The guidance continues to pick up rounds of heavy showers and storms that could move closer to the Mississippi Valley all the way up to the upper Midwest out of Friday into Saturday. Again, this is just a general idea that while that's going on, we could also have some snow somewhere back into parts of the north central plains with continued wind leading to that being with blizzard conditions. The details from there, I think, are a lot more uncertain, but overall, this guidance is indicating anyway that by the time we go out of Saturday into Sunday, closer to the Ohio Valley, the Appalachians, and points eastbound would see impacts of rain and wind at the minimum, even if the low-pressure system begins weakening as it extends up into Canada. Either way, this looks like a strong system, with everyone from the central to the eastern U.S. needing to pay close attention. To sum that mid-range pattern up, here's a very useful graphic I've made for you here. I promise my custom graphics are usually a little bit more interesting and useful than this, but all I'm trying to say is that after an origin zone in the west, by the time we go from Friday, March 14th, all the way through Monday, March 17th, a strong low that makes its way out of parts of the central plains up into the Midwest has the possibility of bringing impacts anywhere from the plains back down to the south central U.S. all the way over to the East Coast, and you need to be prepared for impacts, and they could be significant, so make sure you're staying tuned and subscribing to this channel for more details as we get closer. With that being said, that leaves me with only one last thing to talk about, and that's your European ensemble guidance again, and what this blended guidance is indicating in terms of the atmospheric pattern as we go beyond the March 15th, 16th, and 17th storm that will be moving off the East Coast likely by the 17th into the 18th, and right on the heels of that, you won't believe what this guidance is already showing a pretty decent signal for this far out for, once again, a battleground zone between a ridge in the east and a trough moving through the west, and the cooler than average conditions in the west and the warmer than average conditions in the east, that could lead to yet another storm system on the heels of the last one as early as around Tuesday, March 18th, forming into the central plains. This is a very early signal for sure, but, the deep blues there are pretty promising there into the Four Corners. The oranges are pretty promising over to the Ohio Valley as warmer than average conditions look to build right back up behind the storm moving off the East Coast just a day or two before. So right on the heels of that first big storm I just talked about, we could see yet another one. In fact, the confidence is rising in that sometime from the 18th through the 21st. Then we might see a little bit more in the way of pattern changes, and I don't want to speak too much on the longer range pattern as you get close to the very end of March. But what you're seeing here on screen as we go through the 21st of March to the 22nd to the 23rd indicates at least some level of confidence in ridging leaving the east and us seeing a near average to below average pattern in terms of temperatures due to more troughing being in place. That would be a little bit promising for at least some quieter weather, especially in terms of severe storms and high impact systems bringing a lot of wind. That's something we'll have to watch, but we've got at least probably two more big systems to get through after the one that we most recently just saw before we can get to a likely quieter pattern that could come at the end of March, and even that's still up in the air. With that being said, that's all I have to say for today's video. If you have any comments and questions about what I discussed, make sure you're dropping those down below. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future long-range updates, plus updates as we get closer to storms like the ones I showed in the video. I do daily or every other day uploading most of the time, although I'm not going to overload you with updates if the weather's quiet and say that the weather is changing like crazy. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep it real right here at One Nation Weather. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you right here next time.